Hey guys, it's week 2 of the self-care series, and I'm going to be talking about how self-care actually increases intimacy. And it feels like it would be completely unrelated, right? Like the way I treat myself, what would that have anything to do with intimacy with other people and true connection? And it all comes down to how we feel when we genuinely are free to let go and be known. And when others around us are free to go ahead and let go and be known, it's just an amazing feeling. And when we know that we are valuable already without having to get the approval from someone else, we're much freer to do that. And the thing is that when we don't have a strong sense of ourselves, we're going to need to use other people to get it. We'll figure out a way. All right, so some of the things that we do when we don't feel like we're good enough without outside confirmation or validation or input, we're going to do 3 things. And maybe one of them or maybe all of them, but we're going to depend on others for approval at our own expense. We're going to pressure other people to accommodate our desires, or we will become low investors in ourselves or in other people. And these are all things that decrease intimacy. If we're actually using people to feel better about ourselves, that's not an intimate way to relate with the world. If we're pressuring other people, we're using them as well. And if we are not investing because we're afraid on some level, and we'll get around to that, then we aren't free. We feel fearful and attached to what other people are going to say or think or do. All right, so what it looks like when we depend on other people for our approval, that's going to be people pleasing, perfectionism, not being able to say no without a lot of guilt, or giving out of fear because we're worried about what someone else is going to think about us or say about us. And this feels uncomfortable inside. When we do this, when maybe this is us not speaking up about what we actually think or feel because we don't want someone else to, I don't know, feel hurt or feel left out or feel like they have to do what we want. These are things that, these are ways that we don't represent our actual thoughts and feelings. And this is actually, the reason it feels uncomfortable is because it's not an act of integrity. It's not lined up. We are not representing ourselves truly. If we're saying yes and we mean no, that's not in alignment, and that's exactly how we should feel when we're not in alignment. We should feel uncomfortable. It's an act of self-betrayal. Now, if you think about what betrayal feels like, I've got like a low-level example, depending on who you talk to. but okay, so I quite enjoy talking in church. I don't mind it. I love it. In my eyes, it's an offering out of love. And oh my word, can I help bless your life by something that has blessed mine? Okay, but my husband doesn't necessarily see it this way. It's absolutely something to be avoided at all costs, and it's more work, and like he'd just rather not. But in our first day at a new church, I went up and asked the church leader, so when do we get to talk in church? And he was a little shocked, and he's like, well, in 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, we'll be there. The Andersons will be there. Well, my husband was not thrilled about that. And the reason was that I represented him as being as willing as I was. And it was an act of betrayal. I didn't represent him well. All right, and so we just came up with an agreement that next time I would agree for myself or ask for myself, and then he could have the chance to decline or accept, whichever. But the funny thing is that we moved not too long after that, and the church leader comes and asks him this time, would you like to talk in church? And he agreed. The difference is that he had a choice, and he was able to represent himself in the way that he chose. That is in alignment, and it's full of integrity. It became a willing offering because he didn't feel like he had to. When we are telling ourselves that we have to, because it's an obligation, because of what someone else is going to think if we don't, or what if it upsets them. This is going to feel off. And so if you just think about it, the reason self-trust is so important is that we need to be able to trust ourselves in order for others to be able to disapprove of us and be okay. Because the actual antidote to needing approval is to tolerate disapproval. Isn't that crazy? I'm just going to say it one more time, but the antidote to needing approval is to tolerate disapproval. What it creates is a strong sense of self, and it creates a moral self with integrity and goodness. Another way that we misrepresent ourselves is we don't pipe up about our actual thoughts and our actual feelings. And what we're trying to do is put forth an image that's agreeable to the other person so that we're more likely to be accepted or desired. That's using somebody else to bolster our own lack. All right? We are speaking to our own souls that we don't truly matter, that we can't actually be known for who we are, and that we are incapable of handling failure in the form of rejection on whatever, and that intimacy just isn't worth the risk. Now we can become conscious of what we're actually, the message we're sending to ourselves, and make different decisions just by saying, is this actually what I want? Do I want the fake security of offering just an image that other people will approve of? Or do I want to actually represent myself and understand that the people who stick around actually like me for me? We get to make that decision. I've been in the position where I have made a choice to be deliberately vulnerable. And I'm talking about like really, really vulnerable. Like, I'm not kidding. These videos, I'm feeling pretty vulnerable. But this one, I just felt like my guts, my innards were just like my chest was splayed and my heart was sitting there beating out in the open, just waiting to either be stomped on or whatever. And it was very, very scary. But the great thing is, and here's the really, really great thing, is that I was rejected. And what I developed from that was such freedom. I got a stronger sense of self, and I was able in the future to offer myself 100% genuinely in vulnerability without the same amount of fear. And I found a new freedom out there because I was able to find that I did have my own back. I was okay, and I could handle it, and it was worth it. All right. So the second thing, when we pressure others to accommodate our desires, this is a little bit sneaky. So I'm excited for you to be able to catch it because it shows up in a couple different ways. But we may complain incessantly so that someone else will step in and give us what we obviously need, instead of just owning it and saying, hey, I need a break, can you help me out? We're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, until they finally say, hey, can I help you out? Okay? All right, so we also complain hoping that someone else will validate how good we are. We're noble and we're indispensable, right? Maybe we insist that another person does things to prove that we're loved or valued or important. Maybe we make others suffer for not validating or compensating our sacrifices. This shows up in resentment or depression when our sacrifices aren't rewarded. And we may encourage other people to make similar choices to us, like they need to be sacrificing as much as I do. So then we can both be miserable and self-deprecating. Right? So then we can feel better about our decisions. We're using someone else to feel better about our own poor self-care. But the fact is that the more we need other people's approval to feel good about ourselves, the more we are going to control other people, try to control them, or feel controlled by them. Freedom has a lot more to do with self-care, gathering a strong sense of self and valuing ourselves. And one form of self-care is giving ourselves the emotional validation that we require. All right, the last one is that we become low investors in ourselves and others. And this looks like giving the absolute minimum. Like we'll give it, but it's a shell. Our heart is completely closed and disconnected and far away from it. And this shows up sometimes in the bedroom where here's my body, but that's all you get. And it may just be like a feeling of closedness that maybe you sense and maybe people around you sense. And it may even feel like you don't even know how to get around it. But just becoming aware is going to be the first step. If you're recognizing this, I'm excited for you, because then you can start to change it. It's really hard to change something you can't see. Something else we do is we may become too busy or too irritable, so that people quit trying and hoping, we kind of hope that they'll give up and stop asking us to do something, because then we won't have to say no and take responsibility for it. These things, opening ourselves up, feels very vulnerable. If we feel like we can't handle saying no to the requests of others, we may become low investors in them. And if you find this in yourself, I can tell you I found this in myself, and it causes a little bit of grief and remorse. But if you can try to stay curious and hopeful about what this means, about what you can do from this point forward, awesome. All right, so the last part of that is when we become low investors, we are often the people who are withholding compassion and love and care and acceptance to ourselves. And we may not allow ourselves to truly receive from other people. If they give us compliments, it may not have anywhere to land, because we haven't saved space for that inside of our own hearts. We may be at the party, but not allowed to enjoy the party. These are the sticks in the mud, the party poopers, who are there attending to other people's needs, but feel no sense of joy. And that's kind of our way, sometimes without realizing it, is punishing us. We have to deserve it, we have to earn it, and we can't have fun until we have met some sort of unknown criteria. We feel like other people deserve to have the fun, but we don't qualify. So we have the opportunity now to look at some of the things that we're doing. This is something that can be tricky. It's hard to see your own stuff. If you find that you recognize some of these things in yourself, you want to change them but aren't quite sure how to move forward, will you please give me a call? It's free, or you can message me, and let's try to figure out what we can do to get you investing in yourself, investing in others, not relying on other people for approval in any way, so that you can be 100% whole and know it. Okay, talk to you next time.